We do know that Camilla had told friends at this point that she was surprised at the unexpected side to William that she had found. "The boy's got a temper," she apparently said.
King William had not even put on the crown before his first signed order shattered the peace at Clarence House. At 6 o'clock on his first morning as monarch, a fleet of private security vehicles arrived to strip Queen Camilla's children of their state protection and royal access keys. By noon, eviction notices were delivered to her immediate family, permanently ending their era of palace privilege in a single morning. As the new king resets the boundaries of the court, Camilla's relatives face immediate, brutal consequences under a ruthless new reign: the accession cleansing. A fleet of silver royal protection SUVs idling in the courtyard of Clarence House began their engines at exactly 5:30 in the morning. The pre-dawn mist hung low over the brickwork. A senior operations officer stepped out of the lead vehicle. He carried an official black leather portfolio bearing the new sovereign's gold cipher. The officer did not knock on the main residence doors. Instead, he walked directly to the guardhouse at the outer gates. He presented a newly stamped royal warrant to the sergeant on duty. The order was signed by King William less than 2 hours after his official accession. The legal mechanism behind this dawn arrival was an absolute revocation of proxy security details. Under the Royal Marriages and Sovereign Protection Acts, the distribution of state-funded bodyguards is managed through the Home Office's specialized committee. However, the sitting monarch retains an ultimate constitutional veto over who receives protection within royal properties. King William utilized this prerogative instantly. The warrant officially canceled the temporary non-lineal security allocations that had been granted to Camilla's immediate family during the previous administration. The physical reality of this change hit Tom Parker Bowles's private residence by 6 in the morning. 2 plainclothes protection officers who had managed his daily travel logistics for over a year stepped out of his building. They surrendered their official palace communication encrypted radios to the supervisor on duty. Their specialized security clearance keys were deactivated on the spot. Tom was left standing on his doorstep, holding his morning paper, as the state-funded security vehicles drove away toward the Central Met Depot. This sudden withdrawal altered the operational map of the court before the public even knew the transition had occurred. The public assumes that royal relatives maintain their privileges indefinitely through family tradition. In reality, every detail of palace life relies on active, signed authorizations from the reigning sovereign. King William's first decree drew an immediate line between blood relatives in the direct line of succession and those who entered the family through marriage. The message was unmistakable. The previous administration's lenient boundary lines were completely erased. The tension turned concrete at Buckingham Palace by 7 in the morning. The director of the Royal Collection arrived at the administrative offices to find 2 security officers guarding the archive entry doors. They were executing a secondary clause from the new king's morning warrant. The clause ordered an immediate total freeze on all high-value loans of historical artifacts to extended family members. This directly impacted Camilla's daughter, Laura Lopes, who had previously secured an informal agreement to feature several historic royal portraits in an upcoming independent art exhibition. The exhibition committee was thrown into complete chaos. The transport manifests for the paintings had already been finalized, and the specialized insurance papers were signed. The new king's freeze meant the artwork could not be loaded into the delivery vans. The museum directors had to remove the royal items from their catalogs by mid-morning, leaving 2 massive gaps on their display walls. The palace refused to issue a public explanation, stating simply that all art assets were undergoing a standard sovereign audit under the new reign. The rapid implementation of these orders introduced a major mystery into the palace legal department. The standard procedure for a royal transition involves weeks of administrative handovers and courtesy notice periods for staff and relatives. King William's team bypassed these traditional courtesy windows completely. They had the legal paperwork drafted, vetted, and stamped by high court judges days before the formal accession took place. The speed of the operation suggested that the new king's inner circle had been planning this administrative cleansing for a considerable time. The mystery of why the transition was handled with such aggression was resolved by a quick review of the Duchy of Cornwall financial files from the previous year. During the late summer, A proposal had been quietly circulated by Clarence House to grant a permanent, state-supported foundation status to several charitable projects managed by Camilla's children. The proposal would have tied up millions of pounds in royal estate revenues for decades. William had firmly opposed the project at the time, but his objections were overruled by the previous administration. He used his very first morning as king to permanently dismantle the entire funding structure. This financial intervention opened an even larger question regarding the remaining residency status of the former queen consort. The third page of the morning warrant contained a specific restricted directive regarding the occupancy of the state apartments at Windsor. The text ordered a complete logistical audit of every room previously allocated to Camilla's personal guests and distant relatives. The access codes for the private guest wings were changed by noon, forcing several extended family members to cancel their scheduled autumn visits. The day concluded with the official court circular releasing its first update under the new reign. The digital pages were stripped of all references to Camilla's family members, removing them entirely from the ceremonial roster for the upcoming state opening of Parliament. The palace staff spent the afternoon updating the electronic security gates across London, ensuring that the old access cards would no longer open a single door within the royal estate. The legal lines were now completely absolute, the security assets were reallocated, and the new king's authority was firmly established before sunset. The era of casual family privilege had vanished in the span of 12 hours. The next phase of the transition was already playing out behind the closed doors of the main palace offices, where Queen Catherine's new administrative team was preparing a massive restructuring of the royal household's inner circle. Dawn at the palace. The large mahogany double doors of the Privy Purse office at Buckingham Palace swung open at exactly 8 in the morning. King William's newly appointed master of the household walked inside, carrying an aluminum briefcase. 3 senior accountants from the Royal Auditing Department immediately took their seats around the central conference table. On the table sat a printed stack of the royal household payroll manifests from the previous fiscal quarter. The master of the household unlatched his briefcase and removed a single sheet of paper bearing the new king's red accession stamp. The legal document was an immediate termination order for independent contractors. Under royal financial guidelines, a new sovereign possesses the absolute authority to restructure the staff budgets of all active royal palaces upon their first day on the throne. This process is designed to ensure that the public sovereign grant funds are spent strictly on core monarchical operations. King William used this financial mechanism to target the bloated network of external consultants, interior designers, and public relations advisors hired by the previous administration. The first major cancellation hit the desk of the Royal Estate Coordinator by 8:30. A highly lucrative design contract for the remodeling of the private state rooms at Windsor Castle was terminated on the spot. The contract was held by an upscale interior design firm managed by a close associate of Camilla's sister, Annabel Elliott. The firm had spent 4 months drafting plans for a complete aesthetic overhaul of the historic apartments. The new order canceled the project instantly, freezing all pending payouts and requiring the design team to return their palace security access badges by noon. The swift dissolution of these contracts created immediate tension down in the palace basement offices. The administrative staff spent the morning processing termination notices for 7 high-ranking press officers who had previously managed the public profiles of extended family members. These publicists were ordered to clear their personal belongings from their desks before the afternoon briefing began. The new king's chief of staff made it clear that the palace press machine would no longer issue statements or manage media coverage for individuals outside the direct line of succession. This drastic reduction in personnel changed the operational reality of the court before the end of the morning. The public frequently views the palace as a static institution where staff members spend their entire careers climbing the ranks. In reality, the administrative staff serves at the direct pleasure of the reigning monarch. King William's immediate personnel sweep proved that his administration would run a lean, hyper-focused corporate operation. The financial resources previously diverted to managing the image of non-blood relatives were permanently reclaimed by the crown. The mystery surrounding this rapid restructuring deepened when the auditors examined the secondary accounts of the Duchy of Lancaster. The ledger showed a series of unusual monthly payments directed to a private logistics firm based in Wiltshire. the firm was tasked with providing anonymous transport and courier services for Camilla's children during major international sporting events. The palace accountants had historically categorized these expenses under the generic heading of estate security liaison fees, keeping them completely hidden from public oversight. The puzzle was quickly solved when the auditing team cross-referenced the transport logs with the private diaries of the former master of the household. The previous sovereign had authorized these payments as a quiet way to subsidize the lifestyles of his stepchildren without using the official public sovereign grant money. King William's team identified the loophole and closed it within his first 3 hours on the throne. The private logistics firm was notified that its services were no longer required, and the funding line was permanently deleted from the duchy accounts. This rapid financial intervention created an immediate problem for the ongoing organization of the king's accession ceremonies. The palace had previously booked a massive catering and event production firm managed by a relative of Tom Parker Bowles to handle the VIP receptions at Westminster. The contract was worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. With the new termination orders active, the entire contract was voided. The accession planning committee had to find a replacement firm within 6 hours, forcing them to rely on the standard military catering corps to avoid an operational disaster. The focus of the morning then turned to the physical infrastructure of Buckingham Palace itself. At 11 o'clock, a team of IT specialists from the government communications headquarters arrived at the palace telecommunications hub. They were executing a direct order from Queen Catherine's new administrative director. The team spent 2 hours systematically revoking the encrypted email access accounts and private digital network portals previously used by Camilla's extended family network. Their remote digital access to the royal databases was completely severed. The day closed with the delivery of a new, highly restricted operational handbook to the palace police detail. The handbook laid down a strict new protocol for the handling of private mail and deliveries entering the royal palaces. From that moment on, any package addressed to a non-blood relative would no longer be accepted by the royal mailroom. The items would be returned directly to the sender or rerouted to private addresses outside London. The legal lines were completely absolute. The staff restructuring was finished, and the new king's corporate footprint was firmly established before the afternoon came to an end. The administrative network that had supported Camilla's family for years was completely dismantled in the span of a few hours. The next phase of the transition was already taking shape at the gates of Windsor Castle, where the physical eviction notices were being prepared for immediate delivery to the Grace and Favor cottages. The eviction order. A Royal Mail motorcycle courier pulled up outside the secure residential courtyard of a quiet estate on the outskirts of the Windsor boundary at precisely noon. The rider did not leave the package in the standard parcel drop. He waited by the black iron gate until Tom Parker Bowles came down the gravel path to sign the digital receiver log. The delivery consisted of a stiff, cream-colored envelope bearing the official emblem of the Crown Estate Commissioners. Inside was a formal notice to vacate the premises, stamped with King William's new legal seal. The letter gave the occupants a hard 30-day deadline to clear their personal property from the building. The legal backing for this notice relied on a thorough restructure of the Grace and Favor Housing Registry. Under the Crown Estate Act, residences located within the historic royal domains are held strictly at the discretion of the reigning sovereign for the use of active Commonwealth representatives and direct working royals. The previous administration had utilized an informal loophole to grant long-term occupancy licenses to Camilla's immediate children and their families. King William used his very first afternoon on the throne to revoke these licenses across the board, reclassifying the properties as administrative assets for the new household staff. The physical reality of the eviction caused an immediate logistical crisis for Laura Lopez at her Wiltshire residence. At 1 in the afternoon, a local moving coordinator arrived at her gates, accompanied by an official from the Royal Collection Trust. They carried a specialized transit container designed to transport high-value historic property. The official presented a legal reclamation order for a set of silver-gilt table candelabra and a 19th-century landscape painting that had been loaned to the property from the royal storage vaults during the previous summer season. The removal team spent 2 hours packing the historic silver into the transit cases under the watchful eye of local police officers. The itemized list was exceptionally strict, leaving no room for negotiation or delays. The family had to surrender the items on the spot, as the truck drove away toward the central depository at Windsor. This sudden reclamation proved that the new king's administration was systematically stripping non-blood relatives of the physical and symbolic trappings of royal life. The era of informal property sharing was completely over. The tension turned concrete when the estate lawyers attempted to challenge the timeline of the eviction order. They argued that under standard British tenant laws, an occupant is entitled to a minimum 60-day notice period before a property can be legally reclaimed. The Crown Estate legal team rejected the argument within 30 minutes. They produced a copy of the original occupancy agreement signed during the previous reign. The text contained a specific sovereign clause stating that all grace and favor licenses terminate automatically upon the demise of the crown or the accession of a new monarch. This brings us to a major financial mystery within the Windsor Land Registry files. The auditing team discovered that the maintenance and utility bills for these specific family residences had been automatically billed to the Duchy of Lancaster account for the past 3 years. The total cost exceeded £200,000 of private revenue. The palace accountants had hidden these expenses under the generic heading of Windsor Perimeter Security Upkeep, ensuring that the public and Parliament remained entirely unaware of the private subsidies. The puzzle was quickly solved when the auditors traced the electronic billing codes back to a private directive signed by the former keeper of the Privy Purse. The previous sovereign had authorized the hidden billing cycle as a way to relieve his stepchildren of the high cost of maintaining historic brick properties. King William's team canceled the arrangement immediately, issuing a retroactive billing demand to Camilla's family for the utility costs incurred during the current fiscal quarter. The family was held directly liable for the debt. The rapid implementation of these eviction orders created immediate panic among the senior courtiers who had aligned themselves with the previous administration. Several high-ranking estate managers who had helped secure the housing licenses for Camilla's children quietly submitted their resignations by 3 in the afternoon. They realized that their positions within the new court were entirely compromised. The new king's chief of staff accepted the resignations instantly, replacing the traditional managers with lean, military-trained logistics officers from the Royal Navy. The focus then shifted to the commercial implications of the property reclamation. Tom Parker Bowles had been using a private home office within the Windsor estate to manage his independent food writing and consulting business. The location provided his commercial ventures with an immense amount of prestige, allowing him to host international culinary investors within the secure gates of a royal domain. The eviction notice meant his business lost its historic backdrop overnight, forcing his team to look for commercial office space in central London at standard market rates. The day ended with the arrival of a structural engineering team at the Windsor estate cottages. They began installing new electronic keypad locks on the outer gates, rendering the old physical keys completely useless. The moving vans were already booked for the upcoming weekend, and the family members spent the evening packing personal files into cardboard boxes under the supervision of palace security officers. The legal lines were now completely absolute. The properties were reclaimed, and the new king's boundary lines were firmly established before the evening briefing concluded. The administrative network that had allowed Camilla's family to live within the royal perimeter was entirely dismantled in a single morning. The next phase of the transition was already taking shape inside the main administrative offices of Buckingham Palace, where Queen Catherine's new team was preparing to execute a massive audit of the sovereign jewelry vaults. The Shadow Court dissolved. The Assistant Comptroller of the Lord Chamberlain's office deleted 3 names from the digital master template of the Royal Circular at precisely 2 in the afternoon. He used a secure desktop terminal inside the administrative wing of St. James's Palace. A red confirmation box blinked on the monitor screen before the system updated the global directory. Outside the window, the traffic on Pall Mall moved slowly through the London drizzle. The removal of those names was not a routine IT update. It signaled the immediate, total dissolution of the ceremonial positions granted to Camilla's extended family during the previous reign. The formal mechanism behind this digital deletion was an emergency revision of the Royal Warrant of Precedence. Under British constitutional tradition, the sovereign possesses the sole authority to dictate who holds honorary titles and who is invited to sit in the royal boxes during state events. King William used this individual power to strip Camilla's relatives of their ceremonial status. They were permanently removed from the official list of individuals who could represent the crown at public engagements or wear official family insignias at state banquets. The physical reality of this change struck the central London offices of several major national charities by mid-afternoon. The director of a prestigious arts foundation received a direct telephone call from the palace liaison officer. The message was brief and non-negotiable. Tom Parker Bowles was being removed as the honorary patron of the foundation's annual gala dinner. His name was to be stripped from all pre-printed programs and digital promotional banners within 24 hours. The foundation was ordered to replace his listing with a generic placeholder until a permanent royal patron from the direct bloodline could be assigned. The rapid cancellation of these public roles caused immediate tension between the new king's legal advisors and the remaining members of the Privy Council. Several traditionalists within the council argued that removing step-family members from minor charitable patronages so quickly would look unnecessarily aggressive to the public. They pushed for a gradual transition period that would allow the relatives to step down quietly over the course of a year. The new king's chief of staff rejected the proposal instantly. He stated that the new administration required absolute clarity from day one. There would be no blending of private family connections with the official public work of the monarchy. This strict division altered the operational landscape of the court before the afternoon came to an end. The public frequently assumes that royal patronages are lifetime honors that carry no real political weight. In reality, a royal patronage is a powerful tool for elevating specific organizations and granting social legitimacy to the individuals who run them. By pulling these honors from Camilla's family, King William systematically dismantled the parallel court that had grown around Clarence House during the previous decade. The informal network of influence was entirely starved of its official backing. The mystery surrounding this rapid administrative purge deepened when the legal team examined the guest list for the upcoming state opening of Parliament. The original planning logs from the previous spring showed that a special row of seats in the royal gallery had been allocated to Camilla's grandchildren. The tickets were issued under a highly unusual classification, marked as Special Sovereign Attendants. This designation would have allowed the children to walk in the official procession behind the king, gaining immense international television exposure. The puzzle was quickly solved when the planners traced the allocation back to an informal diary entry written by the former master of the household. The previous sovereign had quietly approved the arrangement during a private weekend at Sandringham, intending to slowly normalize the public presence of his stepfamily at major constitutional events. King William's team identified the entry and revoked the guest passes before 3 in the afternoon. The seats were reallocated to senior diplomats from the Commonwealth realms, ensuring that the procession remained strictly limited to the official representatives of the state. This sudden reallocation created an immediate problem for the palace public relations team. Several international news agencies had already booked specialized commentators to discuss the presence of Camilla's family during the live broadcast of the Parliament opening. The news of their sudden removal forced the networks to completely rewrite their production scripts, shifting the focus of their coverage from family dynamics to the new king's streamlined constitutional strategy. The palace refused to comment on the changes, stating only that the seating arrangements conformed to traditional historical guidelines. The focus then shifted to the physical items associated with these honorary roles. At 4 o'clock, an official courier vehicle arrived at the private residence of Camilla's sister. The driver carried a formal reclamation demand from the Chancery of the Orders of Knighthood. The document requested the immediate return of 2 ceremonial family medals that had been gifted to her during the previous coronation anniversary celebrations. The medals were private tokens of appreciation, but they bore the sovereign's official cipher, making them subject to the new king's reclamation directive. The items were surrendered on the spot, packed into velvet-lined transit cases, and driven back to the central depository at St. James's Palace. This physical retrieval proved that the new king's team was not just changing names on a computer screen. They were systematically stripping the extended family of the physical markers of royal status. Every connection to the previous administration's favor was being erased. The day ended with the delivery of a new, highly restricted operational handbook to the palace gatekeepers across London. The handbook laid down a strict new protocol for the management of the royal boxes at major sporting and cultural venues, including Ascot and the Royal Albert Hall. From that moment on, any request for seats from a non-blood relative would be automatically denied unless it was accompanied by a direct written command from the king himself. The legal lines were now completely absolute. The honorary titles were dissolved, and the new king's boundary lines were firmly established before the evening briefing concluded. The parallel court that had operated out of Clarence House for years was entirely dismantled in a single afternoon. The next phase of the transition was already taking shape inside the primary state apartments of Buckingham Palace, where Queen Catherine's new team was preparing to execute a complete audit of the sovereign jewelry vaults. Catherine's new court. The heavy steel doors of the Queen's private jewelry vault inside Buckingham Palace were unlocked at precisely 5 in the afternoon. A senior locksmith from the Royal Household Engineering Division turned the dual-key mechanical mechanism, stepping back as the thick vault door swung outward. 2 armed officers from the Royalty Protection Command stood flanking the entrance, their eyes fixed on the narrow corridor. Queen Catherine's new administrative director walked inside, carrying a modern digital inventory console. Behind her came 2 independent gemstone appraisers from the Royal Collection Trust, wearing white cotton conservation gloves. The formal mechanism behind this late afternoon entry was a complete sovereign audit of the Queen Consort's active collection. Under the Royal Collection Declaration of Trust, all historic jewels associated with the reigning monarch's spouse must undergo an immediate physical verification upon a change of reign. This process ensures that every diamond, pearl, and platinum setting is accounted for before the assets are officially transferred to the new administration. Queen Catherine used this mandatory procedure to establish immediate, total physical control over the collection, completely locking out the previous administration's styling teams. The appraisers began their work by pulling the primary leather transit cases from the secure steel shelving units. The first item verified was the historic Queen Mary diamond bandeau tiara. The appraisers checked the serial numbers inscribed on the platinum frame against the master ledger on the digital console. Under the old rules at Clarence House, Camilla's personal staff had maintained an informal checkout log that allowed her close family members to view and select minor historic pieces for private family events and portrait sessions. The new audit ended this practice permanently. The physical reality of the new protocol caused immediate friction within the palace administrative ranks by 5:30. A senior wardrobe assistant who had worked for Camilla for nearly 10 years entered the vault reception area, carrying a formal requisition form. She requested the temporary release of a set of diamond and turquoise brooches for a private inventory review at Ray Mill House. The new administrative director rejected the form on the spot. She pointed to a newly stamped executive order stating that no piece of the collection could leave the vault perimeter without Catherine's direct digital authorization token. The wardrobe assistant was forced to leave the reception area empty-handed, and her security access badge for the vault corridor was deactivated within 10 minutes of her departure. This sudden restriction proved that the new Queen's team was systematically dismantling the casual management style that had characterized the previous court. The resources and symbols of the monarchy were being pulled back into a strict, centralized system. The informal sharing of historic assets with non-blood relatives was completely finished. The mystery surrounding this rapid vault takeover deepened when the appraisers reached the lower storage drawers containing the private gifts from the previous reign. The original inventory manifest from the coronation year showed that a modern platinum necklace featuring rare pink diamonds had been purchased using private funds from the privy purse. However, when the appraisers opened the designated velvet storage box, the necklace was missing from its slot. In its place sat a brief handwritten note signed by Camilla's former private secretary. The puzzle was quickly solved when the administrative director traced the electronic tracking logs of the palace security transit vans. The missing necklace had been moved to Clarence House 3 days prior to the accession, completely bypassing the Central Registry's standard movement protocols. Camilla's team had intended to classify the piece as a personal gift that could be permanently removed from the palace inventory upon her transition to dowager status. King William's legal team identified the unauthorized movement and sent a formal reclamation squad to Clarence House by 6 in the evening. The necklace was retrieved from the Clarence House dressing rooms within 40 minutes, packed into a high-security transit case, and returned to the Buckingham Palace vault. The The legal team verified that because the piece was purchased using funds linked to the privy purse during an active reign, it was legally classified as an unalienable asset of the crown. It could not be claimed as private personal property by a departing queen consort. The rapid recovery sent a clear signal through the entire household. The new administration would enforce the strict letter of property law without exception. The focus of the audit then shifted to the digital presence of the new court. At 6:30, the Palace Web Development Team completed a total overhaul of the official royal digital platforms. The home pages were updated to feature Catherine's new administrative priorities, highlighting her long-term focus on early childhood development and national heritage preservation. All legacy subpages dedicated to the charitable projects of Camilla's children were permanently archived and removed from the active site menus. Sever trends, showing immediate drops in their online search metrics. The day closed with the delivery of a new, highly restricted security directive to the captains of the Queen's Guard details across the country. The directive laid down a strict new code for the management of the private audience rooms within the state apartments. From that moment on, any visitor seeking an audience with the Dowager Queen would have to clear their security credentials through Catherine's central office at least 48 hours in advance. The old, unrestricted entry lanes used by Camilla's family were completely closed. The legal lines were now completely absolute. The physical assets were safely locked behind the new biometric codes, and Queen Catherine's administrative structure was firmly established before the evening came to an end. The parallel court that had managed the family's public image for a decade was entirely starved of its physical and symbolic resources in a single afternoon. The next phase of the transition was already taking shape at the rear gates of the palace, where the final departure vehicles were being loaded for Camilla's permanent move to Wiltshire. The Dowager's retreat, a single dark blue estate car backed up to the private garden entrance of Clarence House at exactly 7 in the evening. The rain had stopped, leaving the asphalt shiny under the courtyard lamplights. 2 veteran palace porters began lifting the final 3 leather suitcases into the rear compartment of the vehicle. These bags did not contain the elaborate ceremonial garments or the historic tiaras of a reigning queen consort. They held private diaries, family photographs, and personal clothing. Queen Camilla stood by the glass French doors of the morning room, watching the loading process finish. Her long tenure at the center of the London court was over. The legal reality of her new position as a Dowager Queen was outlined in a concise, confidential memorandum delivered by the Lord Chancellor's office earlier that afternoon. Under the traditional constitutional frameworks of the civil list and the sovereign grant, a widowed or departing spouse of a monarch loses all active administrative authority over the operational households of the state. While she retains her high ceremonial title and a fixed personal pension, her staff budget is cut by 2/3. The large team of private secretaries, ladies-in-waiting, and specialized press officers who had managed her daily public diary for years was disbanded before the sun went down. The physical departure from London proceeded without any public pageantry or military salutes. King William's new directive specified that the transition should remain strictly a private family matter. Camilla climbed into the passenger seat of the estate car alongside her long-serving personal chauffeur. The vehicle pulled away from the gravel driveway of Clarence House, passing through the secure iron gates onto the mall. The police officers on duty saluted as the car passed, but there were no crowds or television cameras present to mark the moment. The vehicle headed directly west, leaving the capital behind for the quiet countryside of Wiltshire. Her destination was Ray Mill House, an elegant stone manor she had purchased privately in the mid-1990s following her first divorce. The property sits entirely outside the official Crown Estate Registry, meaning it is her absolute private property. Because it lacks the massive security infrastructure of a royal castle, the local Wiltshire Police Command had to scramble to set up a basic protection perimeter around the lanes leading to the house. The days of her relatives using the high security gates of Windsor or Sandringham as an informal weekend retreat were officially done. This sudden geographic shift created immediate, irreversible consequences for her extended family network. Her children and grandchildren were now permanently cut off from the physical assets and symbolic prestige of the active court. They could no longer book the royal transport vans, access the private viewing boxes at national sporting events, or rely on the palace press office to manage their public image. The protective umbrella that had shielded their commercial ventures and private lifestyles for over a decade had vanished in a single morning, forcing them to navigate the public eye as ordinary private citizens. The true finality of the transition became visible back in London just before midnight. The engineering teams at Buckingham Palace completed the physical removal of the old Queen Consort's personal standard from the flagpole over the West Terrace. The flag was carefully folded and moved to the Textile Conservation Archives, replaced by the modern, unified emblem of King William and Queen Catherine's administration. The administrative, financial, and symbolic cleansing of the court was complete, and a lean, hyper-focused new era had officially taken control of the British monarchy. The lightning-fast changes executed on King William's first day have done more than just streamline the palace budget. They have permanently rewritten the boundary lines of royal privilege. By completely stripping Queen Camilla's family of their security, housing, and ceremonial titles, the new king has delivered an unforgettable statement about the absolute authority of the direct bloodline. The parallel court of Clarence House is gone, and the era of William and Catherine is officially underway with absolute, uncompromising control.